Okay? And he's hoping, dreaming, praying that someone in head office understands what he's saying. Instead, there's someone with 3 MBAs who turns around and says, spike in green Ford pickup sales, let's have more of them, guys. Okay. Past predicts the future, only looking at the transaction has been part of the problems we've had in the past because it was expensive. So going back to Twitter, when human beings started having the ability to express what they're doing, they started sharing what appeared trivial. But that trivial expression has, over the last 7 or 8 years, evolved into something called activity streams, which is very sort of semantic web in its structure. By the time you look at how much you get in auto date and timestamp, the structure that's going into those 140 characters, the ability to compress URLs in order to add context to it, the science that is now coming into the hashtags, although my 14-year-old daughter, she uses hashtags a bit differently, right? Because, culture keeps moving with the new generations. So she'll look at me and say, I don't think Mum would like that, Dad. Hashtag just saying. For her, it's an oral culture. But thinking about something like Twitter, you have to understand when human beings had the right to express what they are doing, they did. And it has become a science rather than an art over the last 7 or 8 years. Much more importantly, this switched to a whole new ballgame, intention signals. When human beings were given the right to express what they are doing, they realized it is possible to start expressing what you plan to do. If you don't fix my broadband, I'm switching supplier. Right? I'm thinking of going on holiday to Greece. Is the environment calm enough there? I thought of buying an iPhone until I saw the mapping problem. Has it been solved? And the filter that you're using to deal with this information, the filter has actually become your network of friends. In the past, it was very expensive to get to. All this brings into question one other problem to do with all this technology, privacy. And I want to sort of put an idea to you. Right? This privacy is a bit like DVD region coding. Okay? When I grew up in Calcutta, that was a big city formed of a lot of little villages, and I could go to my local shop. The shopkeeper knew me, knew my dad, knew my granddad, knew where I lived, knew everything about me. It was normal. And at the age of 6, without any money, I could say, could I have a packet of cigarettes, please? And he'd give me a packet of cigarettes, knowing what my dad smoked, and knowing it was for my dad. A trust relationship with deep knowledge on both sides existed. And that was the way business was done in many places. The Cheers bar routine of going somewhere where everybody knows your name was normal. We all like doing business with people who know something about us, who know something about where we're coming from, what we stand for, how we do it. And this was the way life was ever since man settled, until about 150 years ago. At that point, the cost of mass travel started dropping and became affordable, and people no longer died within 10 miles of where they were born. And that mass travel allowed people to do something that they'd never been able to do, which is to go somewhere where nobody knew them. In the past, in a village, if you wanted to do something that nobody else could find out, you had to travel 2, 3 villages away and hope nobody else from your village did the same thing. Right? Privacy was a very expensive thing to have. Instead, today we live in a world where I would suspect that anyone here who lives in a city may not know neighbors on both sides, where it's become normal to be alone in a crowd. And we start rejoicing in it, and we have some ideas, newfangled ideas about privacy. But that is not what man has been like. The problem is that the affordability of transportation technology has now been caught up with the affordability of communications technology. And so there's been the diaspora that happened in physical terms, in analog terms, has been reconnected in physical terms. And that reconnection that takes place across the digital channels is the kind of thing that has happened with, say, television. Okay? Everyone thinks no one watches telly anymore, and I sort of think, I'll take that with a pinch of salt. Because in the past, you know what television was? Television was an event that took place in your living room where the man of the house had control over what everybody else watched. Okay? One screen, one control, and you had better like or lump what was on the screen. Now there's freedom of choice. So my 14-year-old does watch television, but she watches with her friends. Her friends just don't happen to be sitting next to her at the time. And they also don't have to watch it when something is happening. They are allowed to TiVo their lives. The freedom that has come from the technology we represent means that you can record and play back almost anything. You know, who remembers a time when there was no such thing as an answering machine? You know, when I started work, somebody took a message and put a slip on my desk. And if I didn't go to my desk, I didn't know there was a message. That was the only technology available. The API was my eyes looking at a piece of paper. Then someone got bored with the idea that I said, I never got that message. So someone said, oh, carbon copy the message. Solve that problem by saying, I gave you that message and I have a copy. Right? Then someone else stuck a tape recorder to the telephone, and you could hold all of 5 messages or something, but you had to be there. And it took a long time before you could query the message in your own time and in your own place. And when we use things like, you know, mobile, all that mobility represents to me is that ability to shift time and shift place. That I can be connected wherever I am, and that is the network side of it, and the technology, the IT side of it is that I can store and replay later. And if I can put those two together, I can be anytime, and I can shift time, and I can shift place because I can be anywhere. That's all these devices have actually done. All. It's a huge all. Right? Cloud, in some respects, is nothing more than allowing the speed of change that the environment that we live in today represents. Right? You don't have to be surprised, you know, this has nothing to do with the company I work for. You can read my blog from long before that. I have no idea what people mean when they say private cloud. Okay? I ask very simple questions. If your load goes up, who pays? If your load goes down, who pays? The answer is you. Why the hell don't you just call it a data center and be done with it? Because unless capacity is being provided by somebody else with that risk being taken by somebody else, you're only lying to yourself. Okay? I built myself a complete private infrastructure, and then 2001 came along. And I thought, you know, I was a great CIO, and I consolidated, I'd standardized, I'd virtualized, I'd done everything, and then the market collapsed. And I had to tell my internal customers, by the way, half of you are going to have to pay twice what you used to pay because my infrastructure hasn't sort of collapsed at the same time as your business. I have fewer subscribers to this shared infrastructure, so you've got to pay. And they look at me as if I got a hole in the head and said, what are you talking about, JP? There's the worst business conditions we've been in, and you want to double the prices? Right? Go get a life. So the truth for me was, it didn't matter what anybody else called in marketing terms. You know, it's the equivalent of the cognitive dissonance that happens when I go to California. Right? I take a car service from my headquarters to the airport, and there's a diamond on the road on the way. And I asked the guy what that diamond is, and he says, oh, you're in a high occupancy lane. Aha, I can count. There's you, and there's me. And I'm in a high occupancy lane. That means every other car not in this lane has an occupancy of 1. Okay? This new generation won't stand for it. They share everything they do. And that sharing has become a very important part of the culture and the environment. And when we start thinking about the changes that are taking place in industry, why our technology exists, please understand about sharing. Because, you know, I love vinyl, I love valve amplifiers. I'm convinced that the music I listen to is of a higher quality than MP3 could ever possibly be, or even FLAC or AAC or any of the so-called lossless. Okay? And you can't convince me otherwise because it's my ears and my brain. But when I'm doing that, and I tell my son that you should listen to music this way, he just looks at me, 21 years old, and says, Dad, I can't share it. Okay? People will start accepting and trading the quality of content for the right to share because they place value on the sharing. We have to think about everything we do in the context of these small stories I've told you. I'm coming towards the end of my I don't want to stand between you and your meal and your drink. drinks and whatever else for any longer. I just wanted to give you some ideas. The changes that are taking place is everyone's connected. There is a generation that needs and finds an ability to share. They stream everything they do. That sharing requires design to take place, and there are people in this room who should know more about design than many of the people doing the sharing today. In order to do that, we have to build services that are capable of change, because our history has been about building services that have low unit costs. The problem with deep vertical integration and low unit costs is that that's all it does, low unit costs. The price of change starts ratcheting up dramatically. So whether you're in private equity or whether you're in outsourcing, you know the story. Right? You can maintain the prices as long as everything is steady state. We don't know what a steady state is. If you know a market that is in a steady state, please tell me, because I think there is one, but it's called debt, and that's not a state I want to be part of today. Okay? Since that is the case, we have to start building ecosystems, something people like Eurodon were talking about 30 odd years ago, high cohesion, loose coupling, and an adaptive state, an ability to engage and change based on the stimuli that the environment provides. And our systems need to be able to represent that. We've moved away from transaction to intention. The price at which we can record things, we can store things, we can distribute things has come down to almost zero. These changes are dramatically altering not just our business, but our way of life. What you guys represent as an industry, which I'm proud to have been part of for the last 30 years, we stand in the gap at an ability to be able to solve problems that humanity needs solving. And there is no such animal as someone who is not involved, because it's like trying to find someone who's not connected. My wife hates Facebook until her son goes on a gap year and she says, "Can we sign in? I just want to see what he's doing today." Okay? Well, my mother is a grandmother many times over, and she talks to her grandchildren through Facebook. We can say what we like about Facebook, but something that's heading to be the third largest country in the world already and could become the largest country in the world, you have to at least take account of what it does. And what it does is nothing more than things that people in this room should have been used to. Right? Facebook is telco generation 3.0. Telco generation 1.0 had a directory, an ability for people to connect with each other, a chance of grouping and reducing search costs for that directory, and an API and a means of distributing change, which in the original telco used to be once a year or once every 2 years you got a new directory. That was the change. And that stayed that way because telcos were traditionally monopolists with no incentive to change, until about the late 70s, early 80s, when Microsoft became the new telco. And they said, yeah, we'll have the directory, we'll have the ways to communicate, we'll have the grouping effects, we'll institute, Active Directory type changes and propagate them. But they understood one thing telcos didn't, to form the Telco 2.0, that human beings also liked to meet each other. They didn't just like to play games, at the edges of the room. So the ability to schedule events became part of Telco 2.0. Telco 3.0, the pace of change is much greater, because now, I'm married, I'm single, it's complicated as part of the newsfeed. But the newsfeed is fundamentally that record of changes of the static data. And the ways you can communicate with each other have all changed. There are many, many more. But the principle, if you really want to understand, is that this Telco 3.0 says, I'm going to control all the telco-like things I do. So nobody else can control the directory, the ways people talk to each other, the ability to control the catalog of services provided, the ability to authenticate and permission people engaging in this process, and you know what? Everything else you can do. And then they build APIs so that people can build services on top. So when you want to think about these changes, please understand that these changes are the way humanity is coming together in a way the problems that could not otherwise have been solved get solved. In my day job, I look at how to do this at a business-to-business level. Connecting people so that people, the products, the distribution network, all that are able to share information across a common profile and language and being able to serve. But the issue is much, much bigger. It's not just about business, it's about humanity. So I'm going to leave you with this idea that whatever you do in your day jobs, you represent learning, you represent capacity, you represent capability. I hear that you're going to be bidding for a charity right now. Okay? Part of what you guys should be doing is recognizing that you don't have to wait till the end of your careers to start giving. I think human beings, the reason why I joined Salesforce is partly and very highly driven by the fact on the first day of the company, the founders decided to put 1% of the stock, 1% of the product, 1% of company time into what they call a 501c3. And when the stock's worth nothing, because if the company just started, when you don't have any product, when you don't have any customers, it was very easy to do. But it is meant that the people who join the company have this culture of giving. When I talk about collaboration, there is nothing that you can do to get two people to collaborate if they don't want to. All the technology in the world isn't going to solve this. But technology can make a difference. I'm 55 years old. My daughter told me she's getting married this year. I call that the second half of my life. I recognize what middle age should be. I'm excited by the possibility that some of the things I heard as a child aren't going to be true, because the power of the people in this room is going to make sure that isn't the case. So when you go back to your jobs and look at all the things you do within your industries in the application of technology, bear this in mind. You have the power to change the world, and thank you for your time.